Hi Colt, I'm presenting this canon of Nicolaides to the class, and I want you to consider that in relation to your first drawing here. Okay, so if the torso winds up being 2 units in total, that would be from the shoulder to the crotch. The leg should be 3 units in total, and in that case you're going to measure from the outside hip to the heel. So it seems as though your leg is a little short. Look in the discussion for a little more on this drawing. I think it would be a good idea for you to do another of these. And also with this Fumano drawing, you haven't taken it far enough to get the benefit of this method, which can be very beautiful. Secondly, we only see half the figure, so I suggest you either do a second drawing or tack a second piece of paper onto this one. Brittany, your enthusiasm for this week's drawings is noted. I have posted to you about the first drawing in that assignment discussion. Please go take a look there. I feel as though here you are trying to build the figure out of parts and pieces. You've got the shoulder blades, the elbows, the top of the swimsuit, the bottom of the swimsuit, the stripes on the swimsuit bottom. Instead, I want you to look at how light and shadow fall over the forms of the figure. Drawing the pattern of light and shadow is what's going to give you the dimensionality or sculptural form that creates the illusion of the figure here on your flat page. Now, in the second drawing, I feel as though that's starting to happen. And while the light and shadow pattern isn't strong, it's there, for instance, in the chest, and you're observing with great care. Look at that lovely foot on the left side, and the shoulders or collarbone area, that's drawn very nicely too. I joke, I've taken a look at this first drawing in draft review, so I'll refer you to that. Now with this second drawing, I see changes or improvements that were made. And it's become a stronger drawing for it. Let's take a look at the hand. I'm going to compare that hand with outstretched fingers to the seat and the plane established by the seat. Could you think of the inside part of the underside of the hand being pressed down flat to ground? Okay, so where would the thumb have to be if the palm of the hand was flat on ground? I understand that it's hard to draw fingers with charcoal, and you've done a pretty good job of that, but I'd like to see that hand sharing the same ground plane as the seat. And I'd suggest also that she might cast a shadow. Okay, here's Anthony's work. Anthony, your name must be underneath the drawing in this case. Pardon me. I wrote to you about the first drawing, the discussion. I want you to go take a look there to see what I've said. With the second drawing, there's a lot that's quite beautiful here. It seems as though you're really understanding the figure's form in terms of the boxiness of the hips, which isn't particularly easy to get, and the shape of the bosoms. Also, I really like the pits under the arms and the way that those have been sculpted. Her head turned is quite beautiful and graceful. It seems as though her head is small for the size of her body, and in such cases, as I've said before, I suggest you tack on an extra piece of paper and draw out the entire figure, especially in this case the arms and the head, so that you can see how the figure would fit together. Now, if you take a look at Nicolaides' canon that I'm presenting to the class here, you'll see that usually the head and neck is about the size of half the height of the torso, right? So her head's a little small. Katie, I think in the second rendition for the first assignment, you've come a long way in understanding how the torso looks. And even that raised arm is drawn with greater success. I like that you're working with this warm color of Conte crayon. Now, let's see. Have the feet and hand become unnaturally petite. Maybe even the lower legs are drawn in a spindly fashion, sort of stylized. I'm struggling to understand where she is. Is she seated on a stool with her toes pointed, just barely touching ground there with the left side leg? Or maybe she's standing? It's not clear. A suggestion of ground would be appreciated. One thing I'd like you to note is that you can draw axes for the shoulders, for the hips, and the spine. My favorite area in the second drawing is the elbow there at upper left. How beautifully that's drawn. I feel as though you're a little hemmed in here by something. Maybe you're not comfortable with your setup. For instance, if your model is seated on a bed, where are you? Are you sitting at a chair with your drawing propped up on a drawing board on another chair in front of you? Make sure that you're in a comfortable position. Drawing from the model is very demanding. You have to ensure that you're comfortable and your model's comfortable. I'm wondering whether this might be a drawing on a small page. Hi, Giovanni. With your first drawing, I responded in that discussion. I'm going to refer you to the post there. With the second drawing, well, this is a fair start. However, the drawing doesn't really seem realized yet, and I'm going to ask you to work on this more. As usual, the second drawing of the week is the big one. It's generally worth more points-wise, too. If, like I suggested to Katie, you're working on a small scale and you feel a little cramped, I'd say sharpen your drawing media. Hi, Son. I have responded to this first drawing in that discussion, and I want you to take a look there. I'm encouraging you to submit another work, and I feel as though you could show us the concepts and the technique with greater success. Now, with the second drawing, it seems as though you comprehend this Fumato technique. Understand that in addition to toning the paper and using the eraser, you should also use the point of the Vine charcoal later on to develop the drawing. Draw with the Vine charcoal on its side later. Add compressed charcoal to really work the entire value scale. In addition, you should be working with the entire figure. Nearly every drawing that I've shown as an example has the figure from head to toe. I'd like to see you tack a second page on here and continue or extend this figure. LaShawn, your dedication to your work has paid off. Now, let's take a look at the first drawing. It's not the quick gesture drawing with Conte used on its side that was called for. It's a much more developed and very lovely drawing, in fact. So, let's see. Let's take a look at anatomy. The rift in the back, is that in the proper location? Does that line up with the neck, for instance? If the right shoulder is the one that's nearer to us, we expect that the half of the back it belongs to will look at least as wide as the left side half. Let's take a look at the elbow. There, the inner elbow. What's going on? Is the upper arm eclipsing the lower arm a little bit? Now, I like to compare this work to Eng's Grand Odalisque. I like especially to look at her side there, below her bosom and above her hip, and note the folds of skin and how Eng has portrayed those. I noticed that you're working on the same thing in your drawing. Eng's Odalisque was criticized for having too many vertebrae. In other words, the back looked unusually long, and perhaps that's the case in yours too. But in both drawings, we can say that it creates a lovely sinuous quality. Now, your sfumato drawing is quite lovely. I'm wondering whether this is a youthful model, for example. I like the place where we see the upper leg joining the hip, and I like to see the bent knees one on top of the other. There's something up with the shoulders. I feel as though the shoulder that's nearer to the ground is perhaps too far to the right. And I'm going to suggest this idea that I mentioned to Katie and others. Draw axes. Draw them lightly at the outset of your drawing session. ID the diagonal or horizontal, whatever it may be, for the shoulders and also for the hips. Now, I'm admiring that first submission for the first drawing assignment in particular. The second drawing is quite lovely, and I noticed you used charcoal. I'd like to see you use Conte on its side, maybe about a half a stick. You ought to break it in first by scribbling on scrap paper, by the way. The head there is drawn in a lovely fashion. The neck may be tilted a little bit more than could be comfortable. Notice the length of the legs. Most people are drawing the legs too short, and yours, they appear to be a bit long. You know, you said that it took you a long time to create this sfumato drawing, and I wonder if you're going about things in the easiest manner. Remember that you want to tone your paper first and start by erasing.